I would just recommend that you start small. And it's not to say you can't go big. You can amplify, but learn a lot of lessons where you're not as leveraged, where you're not putting yourself as far behind the eight ball. If things go bad, they can only go this bad, right?
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec and really all over Canada. Today, it is a pleasure to have Jordan Silvester here join us on the show. Hi, Jordan.
Hey, how's it going, Axel?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to jump into your story. Before we do, I just want to remind everyone, thank you for sending us some questions, sending us some feedback. I am in the process now of doing a lot of bookings for the next couple of months. If you have any particular topics or people you would like to hear about, please let me know. I'll be happy to go get you those answers and book those guests to make sure you get some value out of this podcast. So, Jordan, you are a broker and investor based in Southern Ontario. I'm going to have to ask you, how in the world did you get started in real estate investing?
So real estate investing for me, actually, it came out of being a realtor for 10 years, from basically 2008 through 2019. I helped a bunch of people invest in one of my mentors, Gary Keller, said every great deal is ran through your hands. And it's not to state that you shouldn't, help your clients buy them, but why haven't you? And so that kind of stuck with me. And so I transitioned to become more of a real estate agent as well as investor, and picked up my first property there in 2019.
Okay.
So that was the beginning. As far as my real estate license, I started back in 2008, went through the last recession, and then we've just gone through the most recent, learning lessons all along the way of the things to do and the things maybe to avoid as we move forward.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you share with us that you're a broker. I've had a bunch of people over time ask me like, hey, I really want to invest and I'm thinking of getting my license. And to be frank, I've always kind of discouraged them to do it in the sense that for me, at least, and that's my personal view and opinion, if you want to be an investor, then train yourself to be an investor. But if you get a license, then it's tempting to want to do transactional. And to me, that's a distraction of what you're actually really trying to achieve. And so I just kind of wanted to see, like, in your experience, and you probably did it because you need the cash flow, and it's totally normal and understandable because we all do. We all have bills to pay. How has your experience been in being a broker, and how has that helped you as an investor?
So there's a benefit. So you see a lot of real estate as a transactional realtor. You have a really good pulse on the market. The disadvantage, though, is as a fiduciary, you're limited in some of the abilities that you would say have as if you were an independent. So somebody who has no license, who's just out doing the wholesale deal or looking at different structures of investments, you have a lot more flexibility compared to a licensed professional. That doesn't mean you can't do the job at the same level. It's just a different perspective. The hardest thing I have found, though, by being licensed is when you walk into somebody's home and you're trying to help them and you're divided, right? Like, part of you knows this might be a good opportunity for them due to their circumstance to possibly use the investment side of your portfolio. They need terms, they need certain circumstances, so they might profit from that versus the list and sell for max value on the real estate market, right? Both have their benefits and their disadvantages. Everybody knows, like, when you're a wholesaler, the conversation you're attempting to have and what premium value you put on. As a realtor, I know the opposite. The trick is, though, if you have both licenses or you're trying to do both things, you can be like, it's like a house divided. One side of your brain's going, okay, we'll list it, we'll do the best value marketing and get that result. The other one's going, okay, but if they want to go this road, then we want to, how do we manage expectations? Because, of course, as an investor, there's a different margin. So for somebody who wants to live in a house and buy it to live there, they'll pay more than somebody who's looking to buy it either as a BRRRR opportunity where they can, of course, renovate and rent, refinance, or if you're looking at it from the perspective of the flipper, right? So again, those margins are different because you have more costs going in, more costs going out that you have to account for to make it a practical transaction. So again, I've had a lot of clients who have considered getting the license and some who have. And again, it's just a question of, do you want to be an investor primarily or a realtor? And if you're going to be primarily an investor and that's where you're going to spend most of your time, then I would tell you a real estate license really will not benefit you. It'll save you a few bucks here and there, but it could cost you more in the long term. Versus if that is a transactional thing you want to do, you want to help people sell and buy real estate, then all the power, but understand the limitations it does provide you in your investment world. Like it just, you have a fiduciary obligation to disclose all latent value and perceived value, future value that you might know if you're an investor, you have to disclose as a realtor due to the fact that if you know that they're going to build this next thing in 2 years, and now that's why this value of this property will go way up, you have to disclose that knowledge as a realtor. Whereas you do not have to disclose that as an investor. So on a very simple scale, it's just about understanding where value is and what's beneficial for you. But yeah, everybody's like, well, I can save the percentages. It's like you're really only ever saving like the sell side or getting the buy side. So it's about 2.5% to 3%. We won't be specific, but whatever a realtor charges on those sides of the deal, got to be careful. But when you're looking at those things, that's what a lot of people are looking at. Do I save that money? But the question is, do you gain by, like you mentioned, the distraction? Like what are you giving up by having the distraction of the listing, of the sales, versus just staying in your lane, doing the thing you're really good at? So,
yeah. And it's interesting that you also point out like the number of different strategies and exits there can be. Like, should you put something under contract and then even just try to wholesale it? Do you actually want to close on it and then just try to resell it with a little bit of cosmetic? Do you actually want to do the work and really optimize it? And so the impact that it has, as you mentioned. So for your experience, like you really started as a broker. And then you said you bought your first property in 2019. Can you kind of walk us through that first transaction that you actually bought for yourself?
Yeah. So I ended up with an opportunity. I had a client looking to sell his property. I happened to be at there, and I just happened as I was walking, I said, hey, like if you sold it today, what would you want to sell it for? And we had a conversation, and it was worth about 120 to 130,000 based on the comparables that I could find. And he said, I'd take 100 grand today to walk away. I said, are you serious? I said, so if I found you someone to give you $100,000 today, he says, yep. I said, okay, let me chat with my investors. So first thing I did was reach out to a couple buddies who might have guys who want to buy it, as well as a few of my own investors. And then that question, like I posed, was every great deal goes through your hands. And I'm sitting there going, like, like this is a great opportunity to buy a piece of real estate. And so then what I did instead was I called one of my other investors, said, hey, you able to finance this deal? We should be able to perfect BRRRR it based on the valuation that I'm getting from these things. This seller understands that he's willing to, for, a quick close. So if we can do it in 3 weeks, he's willing to skip the rest of it and sell it today for this price. And so we ended up negotiating that deal and getting it done. And the seller knew that there might be more value in going to market with it, but he was able to get it done in a timely manner, which was more beneficial for him, and get out of it quickly. So again, we were going to list it. We were going to go through the process. It's probably a 60 to 90 day process for him to get his money the other way. And this way he got his money in 3 weeks. So again, everybody's got different motivations and different circumstances. But like I said, it was really funny was I called two of my other buddies who are in real estate, who I knew had investors, plus a few of my own, before I had to ask that simple question, like, what are you doing, man? This is a great opportunity to get into the market. In our market, 100 grand at that time was very inexpensive. Like most things. I was
say, what is it? Is that a single family home?
It was single family, 1-bedroom house. Like it wasn't anything, that was the benefit. It wasn't anything overly taxing to get into. It needed a kitchen, a bath. Like we had to put in about $10,000. The appraisal came in at like 150 on it when we were all finished the renos. So we were able to perfect BRRRR it. And actually we just sold it recently for $250,000, 4 years later. And so again, the net profit there was really good for both parties, and it cash flowed the whole time. And we pulled, both about, $2,000 a year out of it for those years, plus the 100,000+ that it generated in positive cash flow. So again, a great opportunity to invest, a great opportunity to get involved. And so from there, then I started to grow and really decide to switch into more of the investor role. And head down that path for the next few years, as well as still transactional real estate, because that was still my primary job. Like most people go to work, even if you are an investor, till you get to a certain point. The benefit was mine was still in houses.
Yeah. And so from there, did you keep going in that asset class? Did you go to multifamily, or what did you do next?
Duplex next. I bought a few properties and wholesaled them as well. So I put things under contract, negotiated deals, and then liquidated them to some other investors, and then bought a duplex conversion into triplex. Not legal, of course, duplex with mother-in-law suite for 3 total units in the building. That was a good project. And then, so I'd done, I think 6 or 7, whether those were we bought one property that the tenant wasn't paying, knew that full well, but paid a price that was well under market value, sold it a year later once the tenant was finally gone we paid $175, sold it for $265, just held it for a year. And then, took the money from that. So deals that popped up along the way, different opportunities when people brought them up, got into some partnerships, different investment structures, different things, but mostly in the single family world. I did not really get beyond the triplex level. I was hoping to, and that was part of the plan, was of course to get into the multi-units. It's just, again, different leverage, different requirements a lot of times to play in those games than it is to play in the single family. You need 20% versus 35 and some of the other things. And again, there's all kinds of metrics guys use to get deals done. It was just, again, I was in the process of learning and growing. And then we hit 2022, and that's when I amplified. And then 2022 February decided let's roll the dice and go. And by April of 2022, the market had kind of shifted, and we had some learning to do real fast. So
yeah. So before we go into what happened after that whole period, you mentioned when we found this original property, I called some of my investors. Mm-hmm. Were those people that you knew because they had been client of yours, or is it people who had expressed that they had interest? Should you find properties at a discount, or how do you go about building those contacts in that list of people who would either jump in with you or be in a position to close on it quickly cash?
Yeah, so I had my primary investors, let's say that the guys who bought multiple units, so they would be back either yearly or quarterly, depending on their perspective and what they were trying to do. And then you have the people who are all, let's say, fishing. So and I'll say this, it's not against the fishers. There's just no, unless they have proof of experience, which means they have a portfolio. If you have a portfolio and you're a fisher, cool. I'm more than happy to verify what you've done. But a lot of times people are fishing and then hoping. And so whenever I get these deals that especially have the quicker closing, if it's an on market opportunity where you can buy something from the MLS, get a condition in, then that works for a lot of first time investors. But if you're not in a position where you have somebody who's cash backing your play, it's a lot harder, right? And that's the first thing I did, was turn around and call my cash guys and go, hey, I have a deal in my hand. And instead of being like, did you want to buy it? I said, did you want to partner on it? Here's how we get through it, and made that transactional change because I knew the people in that world because of my world, because of my other investors. So it's not to state that, I usually have a list. If something comes off and it's not in my wheelhouse or I'm not in a position to take it, I give a call to the list of people who, of course, have worked with me and I work with. And I can trust to make sure that if I'm advising the person selling to this person, that they can close, that they're good people, that they're not just making an offer that's not going to go anywhere. Because a lot of times these guys are looking for, one of the things, guys, if you're out there looking, and as an investor and as a realtor, the things that give us confidence isn't that you have to have all the experience, but if you don't have guaranteed funds, meaning you have a private lender basically saying, hey, we understand, here's the thing, here's how it's going to work. We just need a 24-hour turnaround on the deal. And we can approve or disapprove of it very quickly. If you need 3 or 4 weeks, like some of them do, the first time you're going to try to do this, you're going to have to find an opportunity, usually from the market, that gives you the time to get through it. And that's not because of anything. It's like anything in life. You usually have to prove yourself a little bit before people are like, okay, yeah, no problem. The benefit was, as a realtor and the experience I had, people trusted me to help them invest. So it wasn't that if I'm about to put my own, my name behind it, right? Then all of a sudden, I'm putting some skin in the game. These guys were willing to play because I wasn't just coming out of nowhere. It wasn't like I started and I just had this good idea and said, hey, can I have $100,000? I said, hey, here's all the deals we've done. Here's what I see. Here's how this works out. Here's how you perfect BRRRR it. And you have your model. That's what I would say. Create a business plan, guys. If you're a new investor, if you're just starting out, or even if if you're a big time investor, it's still good. If you're looking for money from people, you have a good business plan. Like my coach always tells me, if you've got a great opportunity, somebody's going to give you the money. If you don't get the money, that might reevaluate how you got your opportunity, because it's probably not that good if no one's willing to fund it, right? So
and as you said, there's such, I was going to say, power in being able to close quickly and show that you have the available funds, because that really gives you the bigger end of the stick to be able to say, look, man, I understand the situation that you're in. You need to close within 3 weeks. Here are the funds that we have. We could go to the notary or the closing lawyer in Ontario 2.5 weeks from now. And now here's what we need from you. It's so much better to negotiate when you're in that position. So I can also understand from your the funds, the partners that came in with the cash, they're super happy to do this with you, because you can bring them opportunities like that every month. For them, it's a perfect pipeline. And if they have the capital available, then you guys make a good team together.
Yep. Yeah.
So then, going back now to March 2022, we all know the market shifted, steep increase in interest rates. What happened?
I got my PhD in investing. That's what I keep calling it. So it's the
You
learning,
got a learning experience?
the learning experience that I paid a university level degree for. Yeah, no, me and a business partner, we had both been working in independent ways, going very similar paths, but just with different, like he had different business partners I did. And we decided to come together as like a powerhouse team to grow. And he's been one of my good buddies since we were kids. Known him a long time, got him into real estate a number of years ago as a realtor as well. And then he was doing the same stuff. So we were like, let's do it. And so we partnered up really at the beginning of March. So in the middle, so I bought a couple properties myself to continue my investment portfolio in February. And then I brought him in because I had my one crew working and I needed another quick close and I needed another crew and his was down. So I said, hey, can I use your crew? Can you come quote what your crew, basically, can you GC this for me and run your crew through? Because I know he didn't have a project on the go. And he goes,
so he's happy to keep his team busy.
Well, that's it, right? And so I brought his team in and so they looked at the project. And then he was quoting and he goes, I don't know if I want to like put my guys to work because again, he could have a deal in a few weeks. And this was a 3 or 4 month project. It wasn't something turnkey. He says, would you partner on this with me? And so then we really just started to chat through our two worlds. And so then we actually left one outside of that grouping. So I have one independent of him. And that was the one that was done just before he joined. And the one that he quoted on, that was the one where we started our first partnership. But then we amplified. And so then we went from that extra one. So then all of a sudden there was a bunch of extra money and the crews were to work. And so we set closings into June. So June and early July. So we closed 3 then, and then we had one later July and then one in September. So we bought 5 more in the next like 30 days. So
hold on. And you guys are partnering up because he's essentially a GC who's got a crew and you're a realtor and you also take care of the financing. So from an outside standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for you to partner up because you're extremely complementary.
Correct. And he likes to GC and I like to go find money and I like to find deals. And so I found most of the deals. That's one of my strengths. And he was able to make sure that we would have the crews in place to get the things done. And then, finding the opportunity for funds, he used some of his connections. I used some of mine. And so what was really cool was it allowed us to go ahead and amplify and go from probably doing about $1 million each to doing 4 million together. Total value of purchasing. And so it was a great idea until, April hit. And then we hit about April 15th and the first trigger down had started to happen, but you weren't really sure like how fast it was going to go. And then they went from a quarter to 50 cents, right? Or 50 cents. I was speaking dollars, 50 points and they jumped it and then they jumped it 75. And by the time we could really catch on to how fast and how glaring of an issue it was financially, most of our product, we couldn't even get to market until June. We didn't even close some of it until June, right? And so by the time June rolled around, the market was almost down 20+%. And by the time September did, when we were able to really liquidate the assets, it was down about 33%. And so when you look at that, again, the speed of the transition was massive. Now, the benefit is I built in pretty good protections because we only lost somewhere to the tune of about 350 to 400 grand. And it could have easily been almost $1 million, $1.2 million. And so not to say that it didn't, and I'm going to go through the process of what that means for me personally. But at the same time, the lesson that I learned there the time the mistake we made was so much time leveraging into the market because we figured the longer we held them for close, the more money they would produce because up until that moment, that was true. Yeah. Then all of a sudden that 60, 90 day, 4 month close was a problem because now instead of that being worth more in 4 months, it was down. And the issue is the speed it fell. Like if it had dropped 10 or 20%, we probably would have been just fine, or at least, broke even, and it would have cost us money and time and energy, but we wouldn't have, lost a ton of money until it fell that extra little bit and nobody knew it was going to.
Would you have, and I really like where this is going, and thank you for sharing this experience because it's so valuable. Like now thinking back about it, when you had it under contract for 3-4 months, would you have renegotiated the price, seeing like how quickly it was falling?
Well, again, if there was, the issue is again, my real estate business was backing it, right? And so this is another thing. These are all clients and people for the most part that I know either through referral or through my network. And so the issue became, we didn't put in those types of clauses primarily because we didn't want to raise the value, right? Like if you're going to put in a decreased value, you're probably going to, if you want to like have a reappraisal value, and this is always the thing, and you act in fiduciary responsibility, right? So I have a fiduciary obligation in this scenario. And it's not to state that I would have maybe done it differently. It's just the reality of the circumstance I'm in. where you do that, then the problem is we were banking on the fact that we were going to see hopefully a 10% increase from the February through the May, April, and then into June. And then we would be most likely liquidating all those assets into the fall market when it's up at its peak. The issue was that was our plan, because we had a few projects that were going to take a little longer. We knew those ones up here, and we might have transitioned some in and out just for cash flow proceedings. But when everything changed, we bought property that we couldn't cash flow, which was a big mistake. We bought things that were flippable, but not really for cash flow. And if the structure held at 3.5%, everything was cash flow.
Because how did you finance them? Was it private funds?
Yeah, we used private funds to do most of it. Almost all of it was private money of people, and similar to the way I've got things. And so that's where everything gets really complicated. Is you can't know what's going to happen. And the hardest thing I have is that I take on responsibility for other people's choices. As a human being, I feel responsible, even though it's not like everybody and everyone who was invested with me at the time when things changed took their own decisions and risks, but everything made sense because the market made sense. But it's hard as a human being to be like, well, I'm the one who made the outright decision. I'm the one who chose to go down this path. And then I'm the one who made all the decisions following. And yes, in hindsight, there are decisions I would change, but you can't know that you would change them until after the consequence exists, right? And consequences are good or bad. They're just the reality of what happens. And so when I replay this whole thing, you're saying, would you redo it? Would you go back and change things? You're like, but on the same information, I don't know. Exactly. Yeah, if I know where I am now, of course I would. Of course, if I could go back and not buy any of those and just put my money and cash in all my real estate at that moment, actually liquidate every piece of asset I have in February, between January and February of 22, I would have, including my personal residence, because it was worth so, and then rented for 6 months and then bought back into the market after it crashed. Wouldn't anybody have done that? Right. But if I just did that in January randomly, people would have thought I was out to lunch, because we hadn't seen a drop or a major adjustment in the market since 2018. And even then it was a blip on the thing. We hadn't seen, so I always say to people, I said, in hindsight, yeah, everything is different. And I'm learning to let the responsibility of those who choose to invest know they were investing in real estate. And yeah, it's supposed to be pretty safe and it's supposed to be pretty solid.
It is in the long run, but there's a cycle.
There's a cycle. And when you're in the flipping of property, and that's the primary exit strategy, then you can get burned. And when you do multiples at the same time, you can get really burned. And that would be the thing. It was the amount of hubris I used, meaning that I thought I couldn't lose, so I could amplify at that speed, because I also didn't realize that all my personal wealth, which of course being a realtor was held in those other properties that I still owned, also fell. So it wasn't like the protections I had or thought I had, the financial backing that I was kind of, call it playing with, earned money. Like I was already, it's sort of like the best way I can describe it was when I was younger was as a realtor, we spend money all year and then the tax bill comes. And then you're like, oh, I got to pay this tax bill now. Okay. Yeah. Because nobody taxes our paycheck every week. We have to be responsible to that. And so when I was young, all of a sudden the tax bill would come and I'd have to spend the next month and a half or 2 months paying the tax bill off. And then next year, if I was smart enough, I'd hopefully have more money saved so that way I could do it. But as most people, young man, young guys starting out in my life, I spent most of the money I earned just because I had a family and things were going on. So I learned that lesson then. And then now this lesson now again, it's different because this one costs quite a bit, but it also is highly educational to really decide for your own risk. What are you really willing to risk? Are you really willing to risk your family and their wealth? Or are you just willing to risk in the investment side? And if you're going to do that, it's going to slow you down a bit, because then you have to be able to leverage without using your personal name.
Yeah.
So things like that.
How far are you willing to go to be able to leverage that? So you said in the end, you guys ended up selling those homes and taking a bit of a loss. Like, walk us through the end of that story, and then we'll get some of the learnings.
Yeah. So in the end, we liquidated all of them but one. I still have the one that was outside, but the one with the one business partner, we did liquidate everything. We made on 12.5 on one, about 50, 60 on the other, and lost about 80 across the others. And one was more break even. When you look at, and then there's carrying costs and all the things, like trying to do all of the other thing that got really complicated was when you're in profit, it's easy to spend money on the bookkeeping and all of the things you're following. When you're trying just to stay afloat and survive, everything gets a little more chaotic. And so I'd really recommend, if you're ever in a spot where things are blowing up, ask professionals really early to help you. navigate. Don't try to pretend you can do it yourself. That would be the other thing. So, but we liquidated out because we were looking at it from the perspective of we could get our borrowing power back, and we have it back. The issue is the market is not presenting itself. We can't really take the long road. The long road isn't profitable enough to deal with the debt. And so we're looking at flipping. Well, the market is just not currently in the best alignment for it. So it's not to say we wouldn't take an opportunity if it presents itself. We're very, way more cautious. The trigger finger's a little cautious to pull. Like you're like, okay. And that's the other thing. Don't, people get in a car accident, they're scared to drive. The best thing you can do is get back behind the wheel the very next day, because the longer you wait to do it, the longer it'll be before you can. But at the same time, you shouldn't be reckless when you do it, right? Don't go, and if you were in an accident yesterday because you were speeding, maybe don't speed, maybe slow down and take more time and be more cautious. So that's the best example I have for how I feel is I'm being more cautious. I've had to say a lot more no than yes in the current environment. And that's not a bad thing. And it's not to state that maybe I even have turned down a deal or two that I could have made that would have worked. The issue is again, I think it's an opportunity though to remind ourselves, if I asked you right now, would you buy every property available in 2008 at their values today? You would have. And so again, similarly, we need to keep perspective that today might be the cheapest real estate we're ever going to see again in our lives. And that may or may not be true. And it's a perspective just to keep in the back of your head, because if you allow the idea that the sky is falling and the earth is ending and it's all going to go down, that's not healthy. It doesn't mean also, like I said, don't go back to maybe the way you were before. Find a balance in there where you're comfortable to go back and invest, comfortable to go back and engage, but do it at a risk level, a risk tolerance you're acceptable to.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I was talking about that with another investor, like the amount of actual due diligence that needs to be put that some investors earlier on in their career don't want to do because they tend to be so excited by the deal that they just want to do everything. And that's actually the best way to lose and to miss out. And it's funny what you said about the bookkeeping, because the best way to lose 100K is to try to save 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And how much working with professionals like that is important. And I hadn't, thought about it this way, but like bookkeeping and accounting is actually one of the last thing that should be cut, because otherwise, as you said, you get in a reporting mess. You don't know where you're at, and then you just end up with the nightmare, which is a shoebox full of receipts and trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So again, professionals will always lean on professionals in your world, your realtors, your mortgage brokers, your accountants, and your lawyers. All of these people are there to support you through a process. Again, if they're not, then maybe you should find some new ones that are, right? Like most of the people that are in my world that I've learned are willing to support me and help me if I ask questions. And, if they need to do real work, then they get paid. But a lot of times if you reach out and just say, hey, here's the circumstance, what would you do? They'll advise, giving you just the advice through the process to help you see things more clearly, because a lot of times you get in your own head and it's really hard to gain perspective when you're standing 2 inches away, right? When you can get 30,000 feet in the air and take a really good hard look at things. And that's what these professionals really help you do. They ask the hard questions. And most of the time, I'll be honest,
because they have no stake in this.
Well, you need people who are willing to tell you the truth in spite of your feelings. And if you don't have those in your life, then you're in trouble. And the problem is in the mistakes I made where I didn't want to talk to them because I didn't want to hear what they had to say. And that's absolute honesty. Is you don't really want it because you feel like a failure. You don't really want it reiterated, even though I'll be honest, when I went to them, do you know the thing that they didn't say anything like that? They said, man, oh good. I wish you would have come to me sooner. Here's some of the things I've learned. Here are some of the things I might've done differently to support you through this. Like, I wish you would have called, right? There's never really the guy who's like, oh, you're just an idiot. Like that's not the, they might, but they have care, they have compassion. So if you have the right people in your world, a lot of times you're going to get through some really tough times because of the relationships. And a lot of them aren't going to sit there and look, how can I get something out of this for me? They're looking at how can I support this person through this struggle, because they will support me if I'm ever there. Right. And that's the benefit of those relationships.
And I like what you described as in most cases, their first answer is, oh, I wish you would have told me earlier. Because as we're going through it, we tend to like, no, I can keep up a little bit longer. Oh no, I'm going to try to find a way to fix it. And often by the time we have to have those conversations with them, it's almost already too late. And then hindsight is like, oh yeah, maybe I should have told them months ago. They would have been able to help me better, faster, and in whichever capacity. I think as a normal human being, we have that tendency to, I don't want to say to hide it, but thinking that we can save it just at the last minute. And guess what? We can't. It's already too late by the time we realize. So that's actually a really good point. And it kind of reminds me of like back in the day when I was in the corporate world, where when employees go on burnout, the first thing the companies say is, I never asked you to do all of this. And so the parallel to me is that sometimes as an investor, we want to, I was going to say, kill ourselves on the job to try to outperform or do better. But really, in the end, we put that pressure on ourselves. We have to lift the foot up or raise our hand and say, hey, this is going too far. I need help with this. So just a little parallel between when we work for ourselves and when we work for others and the impact that it has on our psyche.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%, man. Pride is the destroyer of worlds because again, humility will always win. It's just my own, like your own pride that says, hey, you'll get out of it. Don't worry. You're going to be okay. You don't want to look dumb in front of these people, man. If you hang out with your buddies and you go out and you just hang out instead of in business, just pretend we're going to go camping for the weekend. What are the odds that we don't all do a bunch of dumb crap together, hang out together and cause all kinds of havoc together, look like a bunch of idiots together? Yet in business, we're so scared that we're going to be perceived for a minute as wrong that we're not willing to ask the professional the question. And again, I have both sides of this because as a realtor, I have people who won't ask me for help. And I'm like, guys, I'm here as any resource you ever need. Do not
ask
make a decision
me anything you want.
Anything, anytime, anywhere, pick up the phone, make the call. I said, because I'm going to answer it and I'm going to give you the best advice I've got for that moment, which might be call a lawyer, which might be call your accountant, which might be, hey, here's where the market's at. And if you're not careful, here's the benefit of the current circumstance. If you wait, here's the result. And basically, it's again, using my leveraged experience in that market to understand things. It's so tough though, because I'm the last person that wants to ask for help. And that's in understanding pride, that's almost worse than the person who's all about themselves, because it's really easy to see the all about yourself pride. It's really hard that self-sacrificing BS of pride that exists in us, because it's harder to be like, but I'm just trying to help people. I'm just trying not to burden anybody else. It's like, that's not true. You're just trying to hide yourself from having to look like an idiot.
Your perceived incompetence.
Correct. And it's your pride that gets in the way. And that is the most dangerous one, because it's not visible. It's like, again, when you eat unhealthy food, but you don't see what it's doing to your heart, yet you're like, oh, I'm healthy. Look at my body. And you realize when you look inside, it's like, no, all of that stuff you put into your body wasn't good. And it's internally visible that it's not good, but you couldn't see from your muscles. You couldn't see from your body. Right. Those are the things that are harder to see. And I think for a lot of investors, take a really good hard look in that mirror and ask really tough questions. And then ask somebody else those same tough questions and see what the answers are. And you'll find a lot of people have more care and compassion than you would expect in the world.
Yeah. And that's valid too. I was going to say for your investors, if you partner up with someone and they put some of the capital alongside you, you have to be transparent and you have to deliver those news, and you have to, because otherwise they're just going to say, I wish you told me earlier. Anyway, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Jordan, thank you for sharing all this experience, because a lot of people are sometimes really shy to share about some of their harder deals or some of the ones that didn't work out the way they had planned. And I think all of us, and especially those who are listening, have a lot to learn from this, because it's one thing to present it in a pink and sugar-coated way with where everything is great, successful, and they show the earnings. But there's a lot of deals that barely break even, especially at the beginning where we're learning. We've all done those mistakes, and I'm glad that we can share this. So now, what are you now focusing on?
Yeah. So right now, because the most pressing need is financial stability, it's transactional real estate. And the reason is it is the most financially stable thing I have access to at this time. Again, if you're an investor and you had been starting to stop working overtime at your job or doing some things to refocus, right now, you'd probably want to reinvest that money or time and money, energy into something that produces more income for you in a more consistent manner due to the current volatility of the market. That's just an opinion. That's what I chose to do because I felt I needed to get myself stable. And like I said, it doesn't remove the idea that I want to invest, that I want to buy something else, that I want to do a flip, that I would like to get back into the burr hold. It's just resetting yourself in a way where you're looking at the practical shift that happened in the market and then exercising the best plan, I guess would be, or strategy, depending on how you want to look at it, to get to the result you're trying to, right? Because if you try to do the same thing you did 2 years ago, right? If I just go back, I'm like, okay, I'll just buy 7 more in it right now and see what happens. It's probably not going to end much better than the last time, because again, it's not that I don't have the learning. It's that the market just isn't providing that opportunity correctly in this time. And the odds are I would actually lose again, maybe not nearly as bad because the market's down, but I would still probably be hard to be profitable. But if I have a strategy, I have a plan that does work out, where the long-term plan works, then I think you're in a really solid spot. So just understand the shift that happened. Talk to some really smart people about where the current market is, whether that's investing in the real estate world, whether that's investing in the markets, whether that's investing in yourself right now. Great time to invest in yourself, your education.
Learn.
Learn. And again, any amount of, that's why I said the first thing I sort of came off was I got my PhD in investing, because I finally understand exactly kind of how interest rates truly affect the overall market. I knew interest rates raised and lowered the value of real estate to some extent. I had no idea to what, right? Like I had no idea that this was possible, that we could have that much of a correction over an interest rate adjustment. Again, otherwise I might have given it a little bit more, for the audience, if you're thinking about it, like you really want to understand the economics of whatever you're invested in and how those numbers move as the financial numbers move. So money is a resource. It's a resource like food. Know how to use it, know when to use it. And sometimes you need to use it a little bit differently to get the same result, because at this point, that's what's currently working. And maybe in a few months or a few years, you can go back to, things that were more comfortable, might be the right way to put it. Maybe you got to eat some vegetables for a bit, get your heart health back. And then you can go back to some of those really good deals that you could sink your teeth into and, go after the big fat check. But right now, I would caution people just in the market, not to be fearful, but to be cautious. And caution isn't a bad thing, right? Again, driving, caution, don't speed, right? So
right. And I'm glad you mentioned the importance of economics and keeping track of what's happening at a macroeconomic level. And I found a lot of people are disconnected and they just look at, just interest rates. Interest rates is just one small part of it, part of monetary policy and what the government has to do to manage growth. Look at what's happening in taxes, look at what's happening to the money supply, and so on and so forth. So keeping an eye and a good pulse on the macroeconomic, both in Canada and obviously our great neighbor down south in the US, is absolutely key to understanding the market forces and being able to anticipate a little bit more. Now, Jordan, if you had given all your experience and your learning, if you had 1 or 2 pieces of advice for people who are going to get into the market now, what would you advise them to do?
Hire a really good accountant.
Okay.
Primarily so you understand. Accountants are really a good asset if you're going to get into business. And you don't need to hire one like where you're spending thousands of dollars or doing all of that, but somebody to run all the numbers by, to say from the tax perspective, from the tax code you're in and all of those things, you want to look at the taxability of whatever investment you're doing, because there's capital gains on flips. There's corporation protections. There's all kinds of things. If you get a really good accountant, they're going to give you some strategies on when you do make money, how to keep most of it, right? And so they'll help you game plan kind of, if you're saying this is what I want to do over the next year and a half, 2 years, they're really, really helpful to help you understand, should I open up a corporation? Should I do it personally? Should I like XYZ to your world? So that would be one big thing. The other one's going to be is get into really good relationship with some good realtors, right? Realtors do have access to quite a bit of the market. Now, if you're a wholesaler, if you're somebody who is going to go door knock, you're going to flyer somewhere, you're going to do your own marketing and go look for your own deals, then you know what I would still say is have a good realtor friend who can help you understand the value of the real estate in the moment, meaning that here's the current understanding of what's going on in this part of the city. And again, mostly it's reciprocity. If the realtor's helping you out and you get the deal and then you're going to flip it, a lot of times you'll go back to them, to
list it.
You make to list it. You make the agreements with people about how you want to, you want to use the resources available. You want to understand the market. Because again, if you go out and make an offer on a house and you have no idea what the neighbor sold for 6 weeks ago, that's not going to be helpful. And you want to lean on the expertise of the area and use those resources. So if you're new, I would say either go to like an investment seminar that has some realtors in it. Find some knowledge around that. Listen to some really good books. Listen to some really smart people. Start to see where the guys when they started to build. Don't look at the guys who are like, oh, I just bought my next 20 unit. Okay,
Exactly.
that's great. But I would start out with, how did I buy my first house? Like I said, my first house I picked up was $100,000, and then I was into the $600,000, $700,000, doing some things. I would just recommend that you start small. And it's not to say you can't go big. You can amplify, but learn a lot of lessons where you're not as leveraged, where you're not putting yourself as far behind the eight ball. If things go bad, they can only go this bad, right?
Yeah.
And in that gives you a lot of perspective. And that's where realtors come in. And like I said, an accountant who you can actually help game plan how to keep as much of that money in your hands and out of the tax man's.
Mm-hmm. Good advice, man. Thank you very much. I like it. And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
You can go to jordansylvester.com. You can reach me on the website there. If you want to call me direct, you can call 519-960-0350. We would love to chat with you. Again, if you're looking for us on Facebook, on Twitter, Twitter's the only one I don't spend a lot of time on, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Insta. We are across those as well as YouTube. So, but you can get to all those links from any of those pages, but primarily the website is where you'll find me.
Good stuff. Well, thank you very much, Jordan, for sharing your wisdom and your experience without any filters. It's greatly appreciated.
Thanks so much, Axel, for having me.
Hey, thanks everyone for listening. If you got this far, you definitely found it interesting. Share it with a friend who could benefit from this conversation. And as I always say, keep educating yourself, research your market. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you next week. Ciao.